This is CNN Breaking News.
We have some significant breaking news coming into the Situation Room right now. An accused Russian spy, Maria Butina, reaching a plea deal with federal prosecutors. Our political correspondent, Sarah Murray, has been following this story for us. Sarah, what are you learning about this cooperation agreement?
Well, Wolf, they have reached a deal, and of course, it's not official until it's entered and agreed to in court and by the judge. But what we know is that she's already begun cooperating with federal investigators. That cooperation is likely to last, and we are expected to learn much more when she appears in court on Wednesday. Prosecutors once accused Maria Butina of being a Russian spy who cozied up to the National Rifle Association. Now they appear ready to strike a plea deal. Today, Butina's attorneys and prosecutors requested a change of plea hearing in D.C. federal court, noting that the parties have resolved this matter. The filing indicates Butina is likely to plead guilty to at least one of the charges she's facing: conspiracy and acting as a foreign agent. It's unclear whether Butina will agree to cooperate with other federal investigations as part of a deal, including the South Dakota fraud investigation into her boyfriend, GOP political operative Paul Erickson. Until now, 30-year-old Butina has maintained her innocence. Prosecutors accused Butina of ingratiating herself with American political entities to try to advance Russian interests. But her lawyer insisted she was a bright American university graduate student who simply embraced her roots, even sporting a Vladimir Putin phone case.
It's a picture of Vladimir Putin shirtless on the horse. So you can imagine, which she had as a gag.
But Butina became a regular at exclusive NRA events, snapped pics with GOP presidential hopefuls as 2016 heated up, and posed a question to then-candidate Donald Trump about Russian sanctions at a political event.
I'm visiting from Russia, so my question...
She earned a telling response.
I believe I would get along very nicely with Putin, okay? And I mean where we have the strength. I don't think you'd need the sanctions. I think that we would get along very, very well.
The Justice Department charged Butina back in July amid a flurry of U.S.-Russia news. She was arrested days after the Justice Department indicted Russian military intelligence officers for hacking the Democratic Party. And her case became public the day President Trump met with Russian President Vladimir Putin in Helsinki and declined to admit Russia interfered in the 2016 election.
I have President Putin. He just said it's not Russia. I will say this. I don't see any reason why it would be.
Butina's case created its own furor, in part because of prosecutors' salacious allegations that she tried to trade sex for access. Prosecutors later admitted that was an error, and they misunderstood text messages they were relying on as evidence of her sexual overture. But the honeypot stereotype inspired her attorney to release a video of Butina and her boyfriend Erickson performing a Disney love song. Now, once again, we are now learning that Maria Butina is cooperating with prosecutors. This is part of her plea deal. Again, she is going to be in court on Wednesday. We will learn more there. Wolf.
Federal court. What do you think she has that's so enticing to federal prosecutors to give her some sort of deal? What kind of information?
Well, this is interesting because remember, this is separate from the special counsel's Russia investigation. This was a case that was brought in D.C. And so there are a couple of things she could provide information on. One, of course, is her boyfriend, who we noted is facing these fraud charges in South Dakota. He's also under scrutiny by investigators here for his role in this sort of alleged plot. But the other thing we could learn about are her contacts with her Russian handlers. We know that she was operating here in the U.S. at sort of the direction of this man, Alexander Torshin. He's a Kremlin-linked banker who's currently been sanctioned by the U.S. Treasury. So she may be able to give prosecutors a little bit more insight about the circumstances in which she came to the U.S., how she kept in contact with her handlers here, and what they were interested in getting from her. And again, we'll look toward that hearing on Wednesday.
Yeah, we'll watch it closely. Thanks very much, Sarah. Good reporting. We're going to continue to watch all the breaking news right now. Joining us, our senior legal analyst, the former U.S. Attorney Preet Bharara. Preet, how significant is Maria Butina's cooperation?
Well, I think it's pretty significant. The fact of it is significant. You don't usually get Russian spies who cooperate with authorities in the United States. When I was U.S. Attorney in the Southern District of New York, we brought a number of cases alleging that there were Russian spies in our midst. Most famously, in 2010, there was the case of the 10 Russian illegals who were living as ordinary Americans or pretending to live as ordinary Americans in various parts of the country. And what happened there was, at the end of the day, they ended up pleading guilty and then immediately getting on a plane and being shipped to Europe, where on a tarmac in dramatic fashion, they were exchanged for spies that were in the custody of Russia. So usually it's the case that spies do their dirty work, they leave, they go back to the home country, or if they're charged, there's some other disposition. It is very unusual and significant for someone like this to cooperate and give us, and by us I mean American law enforcement authorities, their side of the story and discussions about contacts with handlers, as was mentioned on the report that preceded this. So I think it's pretty significant.
Yeah, as if she's an alleged Russian spy, and I think it's pretty extraordinary that an alleged Russian spy accused of, in effect, espionage here in the United States would, in fact, plead guilty, cooperate with federal prosecutors. This doesn't happen very often, does it?
No, I mean, I'm trying to think. The case I mentioned from 8 years ago was the most significant one. We charged other spies, Russian and from other countries as well, in China over the course of my time as U.S. Attorney. Maybe I'm forgetting one, but I cannot remember a time when you had someone like this cooperating in the way that the reporting suggests that she intends to.
The fact that she's cooperating right now, how do you think U.S. prosecutors, the U.S. Attorney here in Washington, D.C., convinced her and her lawyers to, you know what, you better cooperate?
I mean, the typical way you convince people is you explain to them the costs and the benefits. And so if people think they're going to be in prison for a long time, it's usually a case of, saving your own skin. And maybe they put forward an opportunity for her to get out of jail at an earlier time. And maybe the prospect of a long prison sentence is not something that was interesting to somebody who's young and 30 years old and has a whole life ahead of her. I think what's also interesting here is, this case, like the Michael Cohen case initially, was something that was looked at by the special prosecutor, and my understanding was then parceled out to a particular U.S. attorney. In the Michael Cohen case, to the Southern District, my old office, and in the Maria Butina case, to the U.S. attorney in the District of Columbia, which might lead you to believe that maybe her cooperation is not so significant to the special counsel investigation because, frankly, the case was given up. But as we saw in the Michael Cohen case, once he decided to cooperate, he not only cooperated with or attempted to cooperate, not beautifully as we saw from the papers last week, but attempted to cooperate with the Southern District folks. He also made arrangements to cooperate with, give information to Special Counsel Mueller, even though Mueller had given up that case to the Southern District. So here, it's not only interesting with respect to what the D.C. U.S. Attorney's Office might be interested in with respect to this spy, alleged spy, but also what she can come back to the special counsel and say about the election and all sorts of other things that are in the core of what the special counsel cares about.
It's interesting that she was arrested just days before she was scheduled to leave the United States to head back to Russia. Are you surprised the Russians let her stay here this long?
Russians make mistakes. One of the reasons why we've been able to charge spies in the past is they get a little bit arrogant and they think that their spycraft has not been detected. In the case of the Russian illegals case that I mentioned now a couple of times from 8 years ago, those folks were under surveillance for years before they understood that they were. And so maybe a mistake was made and she should have been brought back earlier. That happens, and it's fortuitous for us when it does.
Well, clearly the U.S., I suspect, had information she was getting ready to leave, so they decided to go ahead with the arrest before she got on a plane to head over to Moscow. But the whole issue of collusion, very quickly, Preet, before I let you go, Russian intelligence, Maria Butina, NRA, Trump associates, is there evidence of collusion potentially here?
Yeah, there could be. It depends on what she has to say. I mean, one of the reasons why you and I are having this discussion about how extraordinary it is to have someone like Maria Butina cooperate is that usually, and at least so far in the case that we've been talking about for a year and a half up to date, is that you have information from the American side. And, the special counsel has been looking for testimony from people on the American side who would say, we had these contacts, here are the people that we talk to, here are the intercepts that maybe the intel agencies have. Now you have someone who's on the Russian side who can give a lot more information and a lot more credibly about the ways in which the Russians attempted to interfere with and influence the election, which is one thing, and then separately, as you ask and point out, on the issue of collusion. So again, it depends on what she has to say, but it's looking more ominous with respect to that prong of the investigation. Yes.
Yeah, I've been told for weeks now, watch Maria Butina. Potentially this could be a real bombshell. We'll see what happens.